presentation. I don't want you to forget your question that you may have had. Somebody have any questions thus far? If not, I will move on. All right, great. So science of the mind, when we think of our mind, we can categorize it into basically your conscious mind and your subconscious mind. We're not talking about the brain. We're not talking about the neuropathophysiciology of the brain. We're just talking about the mind itself. And the mind is a beautiful thing. However, the mind can also lead us into rabbit holes and lead us into accidental stereotypes, accidental racism, accidental cultural ethnocentrism. So we have to be very careful when we're thinking about things or looking at things that might be different than what we're used to. So the conscious mind makes up only about 12% of our thinking process. So when we look at our conscious mind, these are the plans that we're making. This is what we're thinking about consciously. Like I see a gentleman, Mr. Barclay, sitting there eating. He's consciously eating. He's consciously saying that he wanted to eat this meal. When we think of our subconscious mind, that doesn't come into play. Our subconscious mind is very different. These are those involuntary bodily functions. Those are the emotions that we have. They're also beliefs and long-term values that have been instilled into us, usually as a product of our environment. I know I grew up, I was born in the 70s, I'm giving my age away a little bit. I was born in the 70s and really grew up in the 80s. And so I grew up during a time in which, especially homosexuality was still really not accepted. And so when we look at that time frame, it was in the family, it was in the media. You know, if you were gay, you were an outcast. Gay cancer came out, but I remember gay cancer, which was really HIV as we know it today. So that all came out in the 80s, and that was what was instilled into me about gay people, that gay people were just gonna have this gay cancer, and that gay was bad, and that gay was going to give you AIDS. So because that was a product of my environment, today I have these implicit biases about LGBTQI A+ people. Even though I'm an advocate for LGBTQI, I still have these implicit biases as shown to me on the implicit association tests that I have taken over time. I keep taking these tests hoping to get different results, but I never do. They still show that I have a moderate preference for straight people over individuals who identify as being LGBT or I. And that's because I was raised in that environment. So that's our unconscious bias. That makes up 88% of our thinking. And you can raise your hand. How many of you have ever looked at somebody and immediately had a thought pop to your mind without even really rationally thinking about why you thought that about that person?
Sure.
Yes, we all do. Why? Because every one of us have implicit biases. Those implicit biases are very strong. They are not something that we can prevent. And they're very, it's very hard to change those behaviors that we have because they've really been instilled into us from our cultural viewpoint from the time we were children. So when we look at the subconscious mind, it's actually 30,000 times more powerful than your conscious brain. You know, oftentimes you hear people being rash thinkers. Well, that's that subconscious mind really just coming through. You know, sometimes people see something and they immediately say what's the first thing that comes to their mind. That is their unconscious mind speaking, what we call a rash speaker. Are you guys hearing that? Okay.
Yes, I'm hearing it. Somebody needs to mute their machine.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody have any questions on the conscious mind versus the subconscious mind? Okay, if not, I will move on. So what are implicit biases? Well, I talked about it a little bit, just in general, but in actual definition by the Ohio State University says that implicit biases are also known as implicit social cognition. Implicit biases refer to the attitudes or stereotypes that understand or that affect our understanding and decisions in an unconscious manner. So these decisions can be favorable and both unfavorable, and they're activated involuntarily. So it means that we don't know we're doing them until after our conscious brain has kicked in and has said, why did you do that? Because consciously, we know that making judgments about people is very bad, right? We know most of the United States, most cultures in the US have been raised with Christianity. So we've been raised to say to do unto others as you would have them do unto you, for the most part. Not that everybody's Christian, but that's kind of the general rule of thumb. But when our implicit biases kick in, we do unto others as we wouldn't want them to do unto us. It's an accident, it just happens, but there are things that we can do to help understand those biases. So what does it mean to have an implicit bias? Does it mean you're a bad person? What do you think? Anybody?
No,
No, why not?
because that's part of me. Having it, I've got to learn to live with it, and it's up to me how I control that thing. If I think I can't do anything about it, then that's a different thing. But I think I can do something about it, and awareness gives me the ability to then do something about that. Just like you say that you still have biases that you don't agree with, but you still have those biases. I think that's everybody has that. So
Absolutely.
that's why we attend a class like this, is to hopefully just crack a little bit more of the concrete away.
Yes, absolutely. You're absolutely correct, Peter. We all have these biases. It doesn't shape us into being bad people, but knowing that we have these biases, it can help shape us into control our behaviors in the future. Because we do act out on implicit biases frequently, whether our conscious or unconscious brain knows it or not. Sorry, my clock is chiming over here. So characteristics of implicit biases. They're very pervasive. It means everybody has them. Judges have them, priests and pastors have them, healthcare workers, healthcare providers have them, teachers, instructors, professors, law enforcement, lawyers. Let's take a look at that group of people. What do we think about this when we see that this group of people also has implicit biases? Is there ramifications of these implicit biases on the community?
Hello?
Yeah. What happens if you have a judge who was raised in a very biased home against Black people, and now he's handing down a sentence that could be 15 years to life? Do you think that could come into play as to how many years he gave that Black person for his prison sentence? Absolutely. Actually, textbooks today for criminal justice, my son's a criminal justice major, even the textbooks today still teach racial profiling. Believe it or not, it's 2020, and their textbooks still teach to racially profile individuals. And that racial profiling also stimulates that implicit bias. So every time we racially profile somebody for a job, it reinforces that bias that we may already have. So it's really important that we do start, looking at things and changing the way, things are done as a society. Taking out these racial issues, taking out these profiling out of textbooks, out of law books, to ensure that we don't feed on those implicit biases. Implicit biases may reinforce conscious biases. So if we already know we don't like a group of people, that implicit bias may actually reinforce that conscious bias. May not align with our beliefs. As I've already stated, I've taken the implicit association test and found that I have an implicit bias against LGBTQI. But I'm almost done with my doctorate program, and my research study is about LGBTQI. I am an ally. I want to find out why we exclude them from curricula, and I want to make sure that they don't have health disparities, because we know that they do have health disparities greater than heterosexuals. But yet when I took that implicit bias test, it told me I had a moderate implicit association towards heterosexual people, which really kind of took me aback. So now that I know I have that bias, I work on it every day. I work on it every single day to think before I speak. We also tend to have implicit biases that favor our own group. People are very homogenous, right? So most Caucasians will stay hanging out with Caucasians. Most Blacks will hang out with Black people. Gay people tend to also congregate with gay people as well, because that is the group that actually, you know, accepts them, because a lot of people in mainstream society doesn't accept them. So we tend to have implicit biases that favor our own group. They are malleable though, meaning they can be unlearned. Implicit biases can't be prevented because we are a product of our environment, unless you live in a white 12 by 12 room with white walls and nothing else, no TV, no interaction with human. There's no way to prevent implicit biases, but we can unlearn our implicit biases. It takes time. It takes recognizing what your implicit bias is and thinking before you speak, or thinking before you act out on any of those potential implicit biases. So types of implicit biases, there are way too many to list, but I've listed some of the most common categories that we see. We're going to take an implicit association test here this evening together. And so you'll get to see the list that Harvard offers, because Harvard offers implicit association tests, and there's a wide variety. I hit the main categories, so race, gender, intelligence, and sexuality. When we have implicit biases, it does affect our prejudices. It does affect how much we stereotype people. It does affect our behavior. So we have to be really, really careful with them. How many of you have taken an implicit bias test before? One. That's all I can see on the screen, so I'm not really sure how many are there, but I see that.
I've taken implicit bias tests.
Okay, so when we get to that point, those of you who have taken it, take one that you haven't done yet. Okay, so here we are looking at the implicit association activity that I have in store for you guys. But it looks like some of you have already done it. And so we're gonna do it again as a group though. So if you see my email or my web link up here in my presentation, type that into your Google search bar. And just let me know when everybody's there. Just let me know when you are all there.
I'm having issues, so go on without me.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, I'm having issues also.
If you want an easier address, just type in Harvard implicit bias, and it will pop up. That'd be the first thing that pops up usually. Is anybody there yet?
I'm there.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay. All right, I'm just gonna wait and see. I don't know how many people are in, 12? Okay. Ann, do you have a question? Looks like your hand is up.
I have it now.
Okay. Does anybody not have it up? Okay, so I'm gonna walk you through the instructions because this test is very different than probably any test you've ever taken in your life before. It does rely on you to actually think very quickly. You are not to think about things. It's the first thing that pops into your head is what you're going to choose, okay? If you think about it any longer than about a second, your conscious mind kicks in. So it's gotta be very rapid testing. So read the instructions on the screen. And then you're gonna scroll down to the bottom. I believe it's scrolled down to the bottom. I'm gonna exit myself out of, I can't get myself out of my PowerPoint.
If you're trying to get to take a test, it's at the bottom.
Okay, I can't see the screen now because I can't get my PowerPoint to minimize. So go down the bottom, hit take a test. And then it's going to ask you what country, select the United States. And then it's going to ask you what implicit association test you want to take. There's a list of them. Are you guys on that screen yet? Is everybody on that screen where it says it's got a list of tests?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Oh, hold on. I got a couple more chats to read. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry. Okay, perfect. Thank you for letting me know that you're in. So once you're on that screen, pick your test that you want to take. Once you select your test, don't do anything else. I want to talk to you for just a minute. And if there's a test on there about the president, please don't take that one because most of the time your conscious brain's going to kick in on that one because it's a hot topic right now. So has everybody selected the test they want to take? Okay, so again, it's fastest fingers, and you're going to use your index fingers, one on each hand. You're going to use the E key and the I key. So the letter E and the letter I key is the number that the letters you're going to use to make your selections. You'll use the space bar to move to the next section of the test. There's about 7 sections of the whole test. It takes anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes. When you first pick your test, it's going to take you to a screen where it's going to ask you a bunch of questions. You fill those questions out. If you don't want to answer those questions, feel free to just hit decline to answer. It'll still take you to the test. The reason why that is there is because this test is still used in research every day. People still collect data on the results of these implicit tests. There's no personal identifiers for you. The most it asks you is what month and what year you were born. It doesn't ask for your name or anything else. At the end, it does ask for a zip code, and that's so they can get aggregate data to do categories by region for this test. Other than that, there's no personal information. So once you answer all those questions, let me know, and then we'll go to the next step. So go ahead and start answering all those questions. There's about 13 of them, I think.
Kat,
Yeah.
I'm having trouble with the space bar. No typing is coming up on my screen for the space bar.
Can you share your screen with me?
Let me see. Maybe. I'll try.
Is this Roberta?
It's Ann.
Oh,
Wilcox.
you can't share your screen with me, unfortunately. Only the host can share the screen.
Okay.
So what's your screen saying?
It doesn't say anything. After continue, it says hit the space bar, but when I touch the screen, there's no space bar or typing, area.
It's the space bar on your keyboard itself.
I just have my phone.
Oh, I see. Okay. I'm not sure how that works on a phone.
Okay. That's all right. My computer died. So,
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm not sure how it
Yeah.
works on a phone.
that's okay. It's still interesting. I'll wait and see what the results of the others.
Yeah, we're gonna have a pretty good discussion about those results. So I've already shared one of my results, and I have
Okay,
another one to
Great. Thank you.
share. Mm-hmm.
I've completed the questions.
Okay, I'll just kind of see how other people are doing.
I've completed the questions as well.
Okay, great. No rush, everybody. I don't want you to feel like you're rushed through this. Has anybody else? Okay. Anybody else there yet? Is that you, Roberta? Are you saying yes, you're there? Okay.
I'm good.
Okay, so we're all, oh, was Mrs. Dean, Miss Dean?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Oh, you're okay.
If you want, you can go without me. I'm still having a few issues.
Were you able to get onto the site?
Yes, I was. I'm just only made it to 6 so far, but I don't want to hold you up.
So 6 out of 13, I think. Carrie, it's okay, no rush. I'd like for you to take the test too, so you just keep moving. You doing okay, Terry? I can't hear you. You got to unmute yourself. You're still muted. I can't hear you. Oh, there you go. Oh, nope. You're still, now you're, there you go.
I'm trying to get you back to full screen. There we go.
Oh, okay. Are
Everything
you,
disappeared.
okay.
I'm close enough. Just go ahead.
Well, you can actually just, you can actually just click decline to answer and move on.
Okay,
That way it just gets you going.
right. Because now I minimized the test and I don't have it either.
Oh, go to the bottom of your screen and look and see if it's Harvard shows up in your bottom bar.
That's what I've been looking at, but I'm not seeing it.
Oh,
I just
Hmm.
minimized it. I don't know what happened.
I'm sorry. I'm not technologically savvy like that. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Okay. So, oops, I'm sorry. So, before you get started on the test, remember it's your 2 index fingers and it's E and it's I to do your answering. And remember, it's as fast as you can. And I know it's hard to go as fast as you can because you want to think about things, but you don't have time to truly think because that point your conscious brain is kicking in. So as fast as you can go to get your index fingers moving, halfway through the test, it will switch. So if it starts out that the E or your left hand is good, halfway through the test, it'll switch and that'll become bad. So keep that in mind. Halfway through the test, it's going to switch. And so you're going to have, your right side is going to be good at one point, and so is your left. And then they're going to switch. So keep that in mind as you're doing that to read the directions before you start the next part of the test. Anybody have any questions?
What if the the test question has 3 possible answers?
There's
What do
not.
you-
There's not. There's only, it's either good or bad. It's either your left or your right finger. That's it.
Okay, it's giving me 3 options on the test that I'm on.
What test are you on?
on the African American?
What's the question say?
Just a moment.
It should only be your right or left finger. Maybe you're still on the questions, the first 13 questions. Can you guys see my screen still?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to open up, this is my Harvard test here. I'm going to open up another one to make sure you guys can see the screen. Are you guys all to this screen at all? Are you past this screen?
You're not showing us the screen. You've just in an active. You just got the. You're out of.
Oh, you guys can't see it because it's not in the presentation. Oh gosh.
No.
Okay, you're right.
Okay.
Okay. So I'll go back into the presentation.
I think, Larry, if you get to the test, you'll see that you can only answer E or I to the questions if you take.
Yeah, there's only that
I've taken
answers.
many of these tests before. There's no third choice.
No, unless you're still on the question page where it's preparing your, it's just asking you general questions.
Yes, I was on the question page. I'm mistaken. I'm to the implicit test now.
Good. So you can see where you're going to use your E or your I. So it's your right or your left finger only. So when you're ready, read your instructions and then go ahead and start taking the test. Remember, it's as fast as you can, and it's using your E or your I, your right or left index finger.
Kat,
Yes.
I answered the other questions first. I'm just now getting to the 13 questions.
Okay, keep going. Yep.
All right.
And you can decline each of those if you want to go ahead and start taking your test.
Kat, I was able to finish on my phone.
Oh, perfect. Great.
Front
Thank you.
page. Yeah.
Just checking in to see how you guys are doing with the test.
I've completed the test and I'm looking at going through filling out the next set of questions you got, then looking at the results.
Perfect. Thank you.
I made it through the test.
Okay. All right, so you're gonna read through your results just for a quick second. I'm just gonna make sure, I don't want to interrupt anybody if they're testing. If you are not done taking the test, please let me know. Okay, well, it seems like most people are done taking the test. So let's just take a few minutes. And this is really, the bulk of the discussion that I really want to talk. Can you see my my screen again? Can you guys see my PowerPoint again? Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yes.
Okay, so these results might be a little personal to you. You might not want to discuss them. But if anybody wants to discuss their results, please feel free to unmute yourself and let's start the discussion.
I have a question to start the discussion. I
Mhm.
picked the religion one,
Mm-hmm.
and when you look at the results, it's got 7 bars, and there's a strong automatic preference, a moderate automatic preference, a slight automatic, and then little or no automatic preference, and it said 18%. What does that 4th bar mean exactly?
That's 18% of the population. So if you fell into that category, you fell into that part of that's 18% of the population also has the same belief or same automatic preference.
So strong, when it says I have a strong automatic preference for Christianity compared to Judaism, and it says the answer to that is 22%. That means compared to the population that have taken this test,
22% of you have that same
and so then
preference.
I look at my highest percentage, which is in this one, which is moderate automatic preference to Christianity compared to 27%. That would be that's my strongest score or my highest score.
Right.
And then obviously I've got the other ones then where I look at that and I can see, so I've got Christianity compared to, and then I got Judaism compared to Islam. So, okay, I understand that. Thanks.
Okay. So were your results surprising to you? Or did you expect those results?
I was, I need to have more discussion, I think, to understand, to get really comfortable with what those percentages mean. But I guess I understand what it means. I guess it's funny to use that I see I've got automatic preferences, even though there's small percentages for Islam, where where I feel more closely aligned with Judaism because of my Christian roots. There's an affinity that I was surprised that yet I don't, so that, but I need more discussion with an expert to really understand my numbers.
So I have a question. I mean, when you do it, it says your responses suggested a slight automatic association. So then you go down to that chart and you figure out where you would fall. So if I had a slight automatic association, that bar is where I am. The other bars are other people, right?
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So you don't get all, what is it, 3, 6, 7 bars. That yellow thing at the top that tells you your association is where you fit with the population, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks.
And I'm not a content expert in breaking down the implicit association test. That test is far above my head. But I am a content expert in implicit biases, and this test helps to tease those out. Is this test 100% reliable? No, the reliability of this test is really only at a Cronbach's alpha of about 60. So that's actually, the effect is actually low, but they still use it for data collection and still use it in research studies every day. So anybody else? No, Peter, let me ask you a question. Are you a Christian or do you practice Judaism?
No, I'm a Christian.
Okay. So when you read your results, were you at all surprised?
No, not really. Not really
Okay.
surprised, but it was more the test. I find this test, I've taken many of these Harvard tests before, and I find them interesting, doing the E's and the I's. I did another class like this one, and the same, you're giving the same content, but what that person did was they read a description of something and then asked us, so it was like a car's driving along the road, it suddenly comes to a screaming stop, somebody jumps out of the car and starts running away and throws a package in the ditch, and the car then moves on and it's chased by a police car that just comes around the corner. And then it asks you to, as if the policeman's talking to you, to give a description of what you saw happen. But it asks something else. It says, well, what color was the person? Well, it didn't tell you what color the person was, but a number of people answered, oh, the person was black, and they had all they had on was a hoodie. Were they male or female? 80% of the people said it was male, and what was in the package? Drugs or money or what? All those sorts of things. But I thought this is good. No, I like it.
Okay, great. Anybody else? Anybody else want to talk about their results? Anybody surprised by their results?
This is Roberta. I've taken one of these before and I was embarrassed by the results. I took the one tonight on young people over old people, and I'm kind of surprised because in my head, I have a preference for old people being one, but my responses suggested a moderate automatic preference for young people.
Interesting. And typically, we have those implicit biases for the people that we're around the most. And so those of us, I'm in my 40s, and so those of us that are getting a little older, we tend not to hang out with young kids anymore. So your results are actually very interesting that you do have a strong preference of younger people over older people. So when we think about that, it's not saying that you're completely biased against older people, but it's just saying that you have a stronger preference at this point. But it's something that we can work on. Anybody else want to talk about their results?
This is Connie. I did the one on race, and I was surprised at the result. It said I wasn't showing a preference of either one, African American or European.
I was hoping somebody would have those results.
Yeah, well, I did. So now I'm feeling like, maybe, did I skew this? That's what I aim for.
Actually, just because everybody has a bias doesn't mean that you have a bias towards everything or every category. And so I give this test a lot to my students. It's mandated in my class because we're all healthcare workers. And I have many students that tell me, oh my gosh, I did the test wrong. It said I didn't have a preference over white or black people. And it just means that they're more neutral. Just means that, when you did that test, that you looked at everything basically as a neutral, from neutral ground, basically.
Okay.
And unfortunately for me, half my family are biologically black. All my nephews and nieces, I have 8 nieces and nephews, and not one of them are Caucasian. They're all black. My sister married a black man, and her children had kids, and they're all with black people as well. So my son is the only white grandson in the family. But even I have a grandson now who's also biracial. But I took the implicit association test, and I was appalled at my test. It said that I had a strong preference for white people over darker skinned people, but yet half my family is biologically black. So I was flabbergasted. I'm like, are you serious? How does this happen? But again, it goes back to my childhood when I grew up. Although my dad was never bigoted, his mother was. And so we grew up in a family in which if you weren't white, grandma would sick the dog on you, literally. She had a Doberman pinscher that she would sick on people. She was older, if she was alive, she'd be in her 90s now. So she was of that generation who, survived and went through segregation, and that was just, ingrained into her. So I'm assuming that implicit bias stuck with me as well. Growing up, that's what I saw. And I lived in a white neighborhood, only one black kid in the whole school. So I think that just kind of stuck with me. So your results, I love hearing that because it really doesn't happen very often. Usually somebody has, even if it's just a slight preference, people have a slight preference one way or the other. But I've had.
I expected to.
Yeah. So that's good though. That's good. Anybody else want to talk about their results? You can feel free to chime in.
Hello.
Are you saying hello to the group or hello on your phone?
Oh, hello on the phone. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry for butting in.
I didn't know whether you could even hear me. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, we can. You're not muted.
Okay.
There we go. Okay.
I guess I'm a little concerned, not concerned, but trying to understand what this really meant. It gave me a moderate bias in my results, and I'm thinking, well, putting it in another context, I'm a fairly short person, so I think I would have a moderately bias to being short, and so when I see a moderately bias to white people as opposed to black, then I'm concerned about, well, what's that really telling me? Is that telling me that I would make decisions different than I would like to make those decisions? Or
possibly.
I guess the thought I had was, well, maybe in a situation where I would have to make that decision, say it was a hiring decision, for example, and I've got a moderate bias to a white person.
Have we lost
Well,
sound? Have we
I'm
lost
sorry?
sound?
No, we're here. Can you hear me, Peter?
Yeah, I just suddenly, after Larry made his comments, it just went blank. I wondered if...
Okay. No, he's still talking, actually.
Yeah,
Larry?
I guess I was thinking that. Hello.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I can hear you.
I guess I was thinking. Yeah, I guess I was thinking. Does that mean that if I had to make that kind of decision, say a higher decision, does
Well,
it mean that I should take more time on it to avoid bias? I mean, obviously, I don't want to have that bias, you
Right.
know, in that type of decision. But what do I do?
Uh-oh, you tuned out, Larry. You muted yourself. There you go. So when we see that we have these biases, like you said during the hiring process, how long does it take you to hire somebody? Does it take you a week to make a decision? Larry, are you there?
Typically, I'm retired now, and so I wouldn't be doing that type of thing. You know, I was just using it as an example.
Oh, okay.
As you know, how do I compensate for a bias that I may have? You know what I'm saying?
Okay. Typically, you know, so when we think about acting out on our biases, it's typically that instant reaction. That's how we act on those implicit biases. So if you're worried about, you know, hurting somebody's feelings during a conversation, it very well could happen because that implicit bias comes out first. If you stop to think about what you're talking about, who you're talking to, so always using that conscious mind, taking that extra 2 seconds. It's all it takes is an extra second for you to think, and that conscious brain then kicks in. It's not a very long pause. It's just almost instantaneous. The moment you take that breath and think, your conscious brain then kicks in.
So then, Kat, a person should be more aware during the interviewing process, where you might have a tendency to respond more quickly than during the actual selection after all the interviews are done.
Yes. Yep. So just being more mindful. Now that you know you have a bias, write that as part of your, right at the top of your interview paper that you have. Not the one that goes in the permanent file, but just your own notes, right? You know, implicit bias, just to make sure that you remember that you have that. And as you're answering the questions, tailor those questions to make sure that that implicit bias doesn't come out. Does that make sense? Did that make sense, Roberta? To just kind of stop and pause?
Yes, I thought you were asking Larry, but
yes.
yes.
Oh yeah, no, I was just saying to stop and pause and think, and it only takes literally, it's like a second for that conscious brain to come and kick back in and to take over those unfortunate, you know, implicit biases that we all have. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's how we act out on them. And so I always tell my students to make sure that we take more of these tests to find out how many other implicit biases that we have. And that way we will never get rid of that bias. It just won't happen. It's instilled into us. But we can change how we act out on those biases, which I'll talk about next. Does anybody else want to talk about theirs? I have one more. I took it just before this presentation because I just wanted to refresh myself on the IE keys and remember, you know, how they went. And I have 3 cognitively impaired siblings. I'm the youngest of 5, and the first 3 born all are cognitively impaired. So the old term is also mental retardation. That's the old term. And so I decided to take the abled versus disabled IAT, and I about cried when I saw my results. It said I had a strong preference for able-bodied people over disabled-bodied people. It absolutely broke my heart, but it made me realize that, okay, there's something there. There's something subconsciously that I don't know is there, and I can work on it now. And it made me think, did I ever act out on those to my own siblings? I probably did and didn't know I was doing it. So to move on, we'll actually move on in the presentation as well, and we'll talk about what are the potential behaviors of implicit biases. So when somebody has an implicit bias, oftentimes Even myself, I don't even realize I'm doing it, but like if I'm in a room of people that looks different than me, oftentimes I feel like I'm shutting down and I'll cross my arms. And is that really an appropriate way to engage in a group conversation? It really isn't. That is a behavior that tells you you're closed off, that you may have some prejudices, that may say you're really not open to meeting new people who look different than you, or who act different than you, or who walk different than you. Another behavior is not looking someone in the eye. Now, I understand in some cultures, especially in the Middle Eastern culture, you are never to look the woman in the eye, and that you're to look the man in the eye. However, in the United States, we don't have that. You know, we in the United States, we look people in the eye, and that's considered respect. If you talk to someone, you can't make eye contact with them. We have to start thinking, why can't we make eye contact with them? Is it because they look different? Is it because their look makes me feel afraid? And, you know, there's some implicit biases where people do feel afraid, you know, especially those people who may have gone through some traumatic experiences with maybe a person of a different color. So now they associate the entire group with that one specific traumatic experience. So that can be projected onto an entire group from just one person, unfortunately. So to go back, what Peter was talking about, you know, he was talking about, they gave a scenario but no race was given, but people still identified the person as being Black. I have a little thing here, is crossing the street when you see someone who looks different than you. How many of you have done that? Just because somebody looks different than you? I have. I've walked down this, I actually went through a parking lot and I had high heels on. And I took my high heels off and I was running to my car because I was in a bad area getting movies on a Friday night. It was a bad area town, and I was in my heels, and I had two African Americans. They were walking into the store, but my implicit bias perceived them as a threat as they were coming toward me. So I took off my heels and ran across the parking lot. How do you think that looked to them? Probably pretty terrible, and I'm pretty sure that I felt like a heel for doing that. So anybody want to admit to walking across the street, crossing a street because somebody looked different than you? Nobody? Okay. I've done it. It's
Maybe
terrible.
an ex-girlfriend.
Not making. All righty then.
Kat, did you do it because of? Did you do it because of fear?
Well, that's different from the fight or flight response.
Yeah, I did it because of fear, Roberta.
That's too funny. Typically, if we see a large group of people, that's your fight or flight response, and that is normal. Because if you go back to the caveman days, that implicit bias has been instilled into us since the beginning of time. You know, cavemen, if they saw somebody that looked different than them, it was fearful. It was somebody who was a threat because they looked different. So they knew they weren't from their own tribe. That's been instilled into us from the beginning of time. So the fight or flight response is different though. If I saw a group of people walking down the road at me and I was by myself, my gut instinct would tell me it's time to cross the street to make sure I'm safe, but not because two Black people are walking towards you. That didn't make you feel like that, you know, that they weren't threatening. And that is often, I get that question a lot. You know, how do you know it's fight or flight? Well, you listen to your gut instinct. If your gut's telling you there could be, you know, danger in this, then listen to your gut. Always listen to your gut. Don't let yourself think it's just an implicit bias. Always go with your gut. Moving to a different seat because someone who looks different than you sat next to you. Has anybody ever done this? Has anybody ever been to a conference or been anywhere and maybe somebody who had scabs on their arms sit next to you and you got up and moved? Or you've seen somebody do that because somebody had sores on them and they moved away from it because of it. That's an implicit bias because they look different than you. You see scabs on their arms, and what does that mean to us, scabs? Usually it means gross, infection, there's something going on with the person, there's something wrong with the person, when really it could have just been psoriasis. You know, it could have just been something simple that, you know, just needs a little bit of cream. And the other behavior that we see most often with implicit biases is only seeing social issues from your own standpoint. So your own viewpoint. You can't see things from other people's viewpoint because you do have that implicit bias that is deep-seated, and it is 30,000 more times more powerful than your conscious brain. So if you ever go on social media and you hear people, bashing one side or the other, there's probably some implicit biases in there that are affecting the way people are thinking and not able to see other people's point of view as well. So implications of us acting out on those implicit biases. Racism is the number one. Acting out on our implicit biases, especially when it comes to color, racism is at the top. Heterosexism is another, meaning that you basically can't really stand the thought of somebody else being anything other than a straight heterosexual. Sexism, meaning gender, meaning, women may not be treated as well in one firm, or it could be just the opposite. Now we're seeing firms run by women who may treat men differently. Classism, this is prevalent. Classism is social class. This is actually prevalent among our implicit biases. Anybody ever gone to a store and saw somebody use a link card and they had a cart full of groceries that you didn't think they should be buying? Maybe they had steaks in there, not hot dogs. Anybody ever done that? It's just us chatting, but there's a lot of times that people say, oh, they're on welfare, they shouldn't be having a steak. Well, just because you think they should be eating a hot dog because your bias tells you that poor people should eat certain foods doesn't mean that that really is the reality of things. And that's actually a big one. And I hear that all the time with students because we do another activity with classism. And, it's amazing at what people think poor people should be doing. And I don't think poor people should be doing anything different than the rest of us. We're all trying to survive, right? We're all trying to live every day. Ableism. So ableism is abilities versus disabilities as well. And sectarianism, I can't ever pronounce that word right, but that's religious persecution or prejudice based on religions. And then ethnocentricity. Anybody know what ethnocentricity is? I love that term. It's one of my favorite terms. That's only because I've taught culture for many years. Anybody want to talk right now?
I think it's when sometimes maybe it's when African Americans go back and live in Ghana because they say they feel more at home within those cultures than they do within the American culture and things like that. It's the cultural things that you get involved with, the holidays, the way you treat people, the way you eat meals together based on ethnicity, where you came from.
Okay, you're in the ballpark. So ethnocentricity is where we view our own culture to be superior to everybody else's. And everybody else's culture just goes by the wayside because we believe the American culture is truly better than maybe the culture of somebody who's from the Middle East. So ethnocentricity causes a lot of problems. And we see that every day here in the United States. It's not the American way to do this. Or this person's not, they don't practice by the American viewpoints, so why should we let them in office? We see this every day and it's very, very common. Ethnocentricity is one of those things that it's really hard to even teach people how to overcome ethnocentricity because that is truly built into us. Ethnocentricity is. That's part of who we are, where we came from. So how can we prevent from acting out on biases, on our implicit biases? Always think before you speak. Let your conscious brain kick in before you make any decisions. I know sometimes it's much easier to just blurt it out because that's what came to your mind. Think about it, especially once you know you have an implicit bias. Now, there's not enough implicit biases in the world to ever tease out what we all have. But there's a certain category that we can start taking and we can say, oh, I know I had this implicit bias. So thinking before you speak, let that conscious brain kick in. See people as being humans and as individuals instead of seeing a person belonging to a certain group or a certain class of people. By seeing people as humans and individuals, it helps to keep that implicit bias down. It helps to keep us from acting out on those behaviors. Don't focus on stereotypes. I would say 99.9% of the time, stereotypes are usually incorrect. Learn about your own biases. Taking those implicit bias tests, keeping those in the forefront of your mind, reminding you every day that this is my bias. I need to make sure I keep it in check. We can't prevent them, okay? So we can never prevent them, and we can never make them go away. We can never make our implicit biases go away, but we can change how we act out on those biases. Learn about other cultures. Learning about other cultures helps to open your mind. Maybe you'll find something extremely interesting about a different culture that you didn't know, or maybe you had bad thoughts about a certain culture. And as you delve into their culture a little more, you find that maybe some of those implicit biases were completely wrong, that maybe what had been instilled into you from your cultural standpoint was actually very incorrect. And learning about policies. There's really policies for just about everything here in the United States. So learn about policies that directly affect people of color, women, elderly, individuals with disabilities, and individuals who are considered gender or sexual minorities. Policies really do affect people at the government level, all the way down to, just even city policies or, healthcare policies. So do look at those policies and see how that they directly affect other people, and ask yourself, would you want this to affect you this way? And if you don't want that to affect you that way, why would you want it for somebody else? And so that can, by doing that, you can prevent from acting out on some of those biases on other people. This is the end of my presentation. Does anybody have any questions? I just have to say that the moment I came on and Peter started talking, I immediately stereotyped him. Did anybody immediately stereotype me? You can be honest. Nobody stereotyped me at all? Nobody had any thoughts that popped into their mind? Did anybody think, oh, she's young, what does she know?
No, I thought you were a cat lover, and I'm a dog person.
I am a cat lover. You're right.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Although
that,
it's a pretty cat. It's a pretty cat, but yeah.
Yeah, she's a mess though. She drives me crazy, but she's a good girl. So Peter, I stereotyped you because the moment you started talking, I'm like, oh, fish and chips. You must be somewhere in Europe. I don't know, maybe Australia. I'm not sure, but I heard a different dialect come out. Am I right or wrong?
Sure, no, I'm English by birth, but I also lived in Australia.
I picked up on Australia. I actually spent some time in Australia. So I picked up on the Australian accent, but I thought, well, no, because most people that I think are Australian are actually English. So yeah. I went with the European, just European in general.
Yeah, no, I think we do. But I thought it was good.
well, that's interesting. I never noticed Peter's accent till now.
Oh, really?
Not really, no. I've known him a long time.
I'm like, that was the first thing that popped in my head is, oh, he must be either fish and chips or, he's an Aussie.
Uh-huh.
Well, there are Australian fish and chips, and there are English fish and chips, and there are American fish and chips. And
I can tell you, Australian fish and chips are amazing.
Very good, right?
Yes, I've never had that here. And man, my time in Australia was amazing. I ate my way through Australia. I'm not even going to lie.
That's good.
I had a fork in my hand from the time I woke up to the time I went to bed.
Yeah, it's
for 2
great
weeks.
country.
Yeah. All right. Does anybody have any questions?
I'm listening.
No. I thought it was very interesting and very useful because you had a different slant on it to the previous class I attended. So I've learned more about the subject today, but I know I'm still a neophyte in the whole thing.
Yeah, we all have a lot of room for growth when it comes to implicit biases. All right, well, I thank you all for allowing me to come chat with you for a little bit. If you guys ever do anything on culture in the future, let me know. I love culture and I love talking about LGBTQI. So if it ever pops up in the future, just let me know.
Okay, thank you, Kat. We'll keep that in mind. Thank you, everyone, for attending this and participating in the implicit bias test. I hope you'll maybe choose another one and try it, because I've
Please
certainly
do.
found my results interesting.
Mhm.
So everybody take care and have a good evening.
Stay well, everybody. Use your masks. Thank
Thank
you.
very much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
Roberta.
very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. I can't figure out how to X out of here.
Well, thank you, Kat.